are ready.
Greetings, Vancouver. Welcome back to another episode of Vancouver Real. My name is Mike Zaremba, and always with me is my big brother, Andy.
Hey, everybody. It's nice to be back again.
And we are podcasting here at a float house at 70 West Cordova Street. Our website is floathouse.ca. If you want to learn more about flotation therapy and sensory deprivation and how it's very therapeutic for your mind, body, and spirit, check out our website, floathouse.ca. And if you use the promo code, let's say recovery, you'll save 20% towards a single float, 20% for a single float. And also, we'd like to always talk about Omega Point YouTube channel, which is Omid's YouTube channel that he creates his own little videos on there. So go and check out Omega Point YouTube channel to see some really neat inspirational videos. And so today, this is an interesting podcast because it's kind of already happened once.
Round two.
Yeah. So I was on a roll. Andy was out of town, and I did Shalina's podcast. There was, as you probably saw, it was just me and her. And then I had Dr. Rashid Sumaila come and visit us, and we did a whole podcast, just me and him, for maybe an hour and 20 minutes. Had an awesome discussion, really good rapport.
Deep, profound, the best podcast ever recorded in the history of podcasting.
And then I went to the gym, and I took the recorder with me, and I did my workout. I locked it up, and then I was getting dressed, and I usually don't bring the recorder with me anywhere. And I just, when I was gathering up my stuff to leave, I just gathered up my stuff and left, and I didn't bring the extra recorder with me because I just wasn't used to handling it, and I lost the entire audio of this episode that we did.
$500
and
something like that, right?
But I was way more disappointed than about losing the audio of the podcast.
Oh, of course.
You know, that was like, in my mind, that was irreplaceable. So
that's true.
But without further ado, we have Dr. Rashid Sumaila back with us, and if you aren't familiar with him, he actually works at a UBC. He's a professor and director of the Fisheries Economics Research Unit at UBC Fisheries Center. He specializes in bioeconomics, marine ecosystem valuation, and he specializes also in the analysis of global issues such as fisheries, subsidies, illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing, and the economics of high and deep seas fisheries. And we're going to get into detail about all that kind of stuff. He's worked all over the world, and he's published several articles in different journals. You got quite the credentials here. So thank you very much for coming back.
Thank you for coming back.
Real.
Yeah, most welcome. You know, these things do happen once a while, and so we just take it again and do the best we can.
Yeah, and I had so much fun. I had so much fun talking to you. I was in a good place, and it was a good conversation, and I learned a lot. So it's going to be something that me and you will have to treasure forever, but nobody else.
Nobody else. Yeah.
That's it.
That's a nice way to put it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
There you go.
Yeah.
But thanks again for coming back. And good thing for us too. I don't have the best memory, so without the audio to remind me of what we talked about, we might get into some repetitive things. But to be honest, I think it's just going to deepen my knowledge of what we kind of scratched the surface at last time. So I'm excited to get into it today. But why don't we set people up a little bit with yourself? Like, why don't you tell us how you became in the position you are at UBC, where you came from, how you got interested, a little bit of background of yourself to set people up of where you're coming from.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I started back in West Africa, I'll say Nigeria, and then after my first degree, which was actually in building technology, quantity surveying, and then by the time I finished, I thought I wanted to do something which has more to do with society and people, rather than, not that homes and buildings and bridges don't have to do with people, but something like economics, where you talk about policy and how it impacts people. So when I went to graduate studies, this was in Norway, I decided to do economics, and that was where I built up my economics background and worked my way through to the PhD in economics. Then when it come to writing the research, the thesis work, I decided to study fisheries, because this is Norway, right? You can't get away from fish. It's a coastal nation, very important fishing nation. So I got into the economics of fishing and did my dissertation. And then getting to the end of your PhD, the Norwegians have a very beautiful program. PhD candidates can choose anywhere in the world to go and study for 1 year, finish up, do their writing, get to network and mingle with top people in their field. And my area is actually fisheries, economics, and applying game theory to that. And UBC was the top of the place to go. Yeah. People like Gordon Monroe, Colin Clark, Tony Scott built this whole profession, actually.
Really?
So I decided to come to Vancouver, and that was how I came here. And after my 1 year, I was going back to Norway to defend, and the group at the Fisheries Center said, hey, we love your kind of work. We would like to have you here. So let's go. I love Vancouver, and that was how I got to this place.
That's cool. So how long have you been in Vancouver now?
I came in '95, so this is actually 20 years.
Yeah.
This is the 20th anniversary.
That's very cool.
It's been an amazing 20 years. I mean, it's just been action all over, meeting people, doing research, global research, regional, national. It's been a fantastic 2 decades. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, take us through kind of a little bit of the scope of your work within a given day, and a given month, and a given year. Kind of like, what do you do with your work and your profession?
Yeah. As a UBC professor, essentially, we do 3 things. You have to do research, top level research. We are a research intensive university. You have to teach. Professors have to teach. We are teachers, essentially. And then you have to do service to the university, to BC, to Canada, and to the world. So this would summarize the kind of things I do. So the papers have to come. You have to come up with ideas, write them up, get published in good journals. You have to train students and teach. So I do teach economics, fisheries economics, applied game theory, and the like for mostly graduate students. But I've also taught environmental economics third-year students, which actually was amazing. When I started, it was 60 students. By the time I became director of the Fisheries Center and therefore had to drop 1 teaching course, the number of students have risen to 165.
Wow.
So this was amazing. And people love this idea of understanding the economics and the environment together, because we want to have decent lives, meaningful lives. Economics comes into play there, but we also want to maintain our environment. We have to conserve it, not just for us, but for future generations.
Right.
And the mix of these two really makes it interesting to many people, especially the young ones.
Totally. That's really cool. I think that's really cool that you've seen such a rise in interest over your time doing that course, environmental economics, because it's showing that people want to learn more about this. And to me, this seems like a critical field moving forward. Obviously, yours is specialized in oceans and fisheries, but I mean, environmental economics can be applied to forestry and all the resources, right?
Climate change, everything. I mean, you know, if you want to think of environmental economics and resource economics as a fish and forestry one, you have to think of it in this way. You have the economy, or the human system, the social system, that's us. And what do? We take resources from the environment. We take the fish, the forest, the gold. That is resource economics. We try to understand how best society can do this to maximize benefits for as many people as possible. And the other end of this is the environment. Whilst we do our economic stuff and social stuff, cultural, we pump out the waste, the things we don't want, they go back to the environment. So you better know how to do this pumping out, because if you overdo it, you kill the source of the resources. And so, yes, environmental economics, I think, is central to our survival, actually.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's, you know, there's been no more time than now that people are really realizing this. Obviously, with the internet spreading that information virally every single day, it's just, you know, it's becoming a big concern. Now, I want to ask you, as an expert in your field there, do you see it like, I mean, a lot of things get blown out of proportion in the media. A lot of things get extrapolated. They just want to sell time. They want to sell advertising space.
Exactly.
So they want us to get wrapped up in these storms of fear. So I want to ask you, a non-media source, but in the expert, what is the state like? What is the current, like, you know, is there an urgency in need?
My answer to you is very simply is yes, there is an urgency. And there are many reasons for this. If you look at resources, the two key things we need to watch: population growth. We have population rising. We had 7 billion. We are projected to go to 9 billion. And these people need resources to live on. That's one. Number two, we have increases in income, which is a good thing. As an economist, I love people to earn income. But the consequences of this is that more and more people are going to be able to demand resources. You go to Asia, people are eating all sorts of fish. They have the purchasing power to buy. So the combination of this means that there's going to be more and more pressure on our resources and the environment, and therefore we need to be really good at managing this. Otherwise, we go into a big mess. And think of climate change. That's similar, right? All the pumping of the greenhouse gases and so on. So yeah, it is urgent. And if you look specifically to fisheries, think of Atlantic cod in Newfoundland. I mean, this was why many people came from Europe to Newfoundland, the fish. And we've read stories where people used to say you could virtually walk on the biomass of fish. It was so full, right? Wow. And suddenly we cannot even get anything to catch. So that alone tells you a lot. And you see this repeated around the world. I mean, in West Africa, it's remarkable. Fish, which used to be like this, now they get only small pieces of it, and the population is increasing and the demand is increasing. So yeah, we need action. There is a lot here that is going on.
I saw this one graphic video on Facebook a while ago, and it showed I think it was fish populations all around the world and how it had shrunk down and over not really a large amount of time, but the amount to what it was and the amount that it shrunk down now was really frightening, actually. And the pace of fishing seems to be maintaining.
Oh yes, in fact, the pace of fishing is increasing because the technology is getting better and better.
Right.
We are able to fish where we couldn't fish before. You could virtually search out the fish hiding under a rock or reef and pull it out. So yes, we are able to go harder on this. And
how do they do that? How do they actually go under the reef to get to the fish?
Essentially, you have all those sonars and all searching devices, and you know where the fish is, and you can time it when they have to come under the rock to get their prey, to get food, and then you just trap them in there.
Wow. So you know their feeding times?
You know the feeding time. And you have trawlers that just run through
everything.
Break up things and open up the reefs, and so they can catch the fish. So there is a lot there on the technology side. Then you have your point about shrinking fish is so true. There are estimates in the literature that have shown that large predatory fish, like the tunas and their family, they have dropped by up to 90% from what they used to be. So that tells you that's the shrinking you are seeing in some cases. And estimates are that even the Food and Agricultural Organization, which is a more conservative institution, estimates that more than 30% of the fish population is already overfished or depleted or on
30%.
On the collapse. But there are some academic papers that are projecting much larger, over 50% less.
Wow. So they don't actually know.
They don't know. I mean, these are estimates. Mostly it's estimates. Yeah, that's a good question. I was asked by a techie person in the California area. One time he says, what can we do from Silicon Valley to help you guys? Just create a device, an application that will count all the fish for us, and we will be very happy because the methods now are all estimates. And, so scientific ways of estimating.
Right, and an estimate of like a difference between 30% to 50%. That's a huge gap, and that could mean a lot less time actually.
Indeed, for us to fix the problem. Yeah,
correct.
And talking about less time, one controversial paper that came out in Science about 2009, I think 2009, I believe, estimates that by 2048, if we continue doing the things we are doing, we will almost collapse all the fish in the world.
2048.
2048.
That's our lifetime.
That's not too far, right? I mean, this paper has been attacked like crazy, but the point was well made. I mean, that we have to start doing something.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's something I've noticed too, just when I did a little bit of research the first time we had the podcast. You know, you were quite a bit in the media, a little bit, like on different sources and stuff like that. And there's definitely, it seems to me that you know you're making an active part to really get out and talk about this. You know, do you feel an obligation to kind of do that?
Absolutely, and this is a new trend you see quite a bit in the universities, where professors don't believe that all we need to do is to publish our papers, put them on the shelf, decorate our offices we are publishing. No, we believe that once we find out something, it is also our duty to inform. Let the population know, let policymakers know, so they can have a lot of information at their disposal, hopefully make better decisions for society. So you'll see a number of us doing this. And fortunately, the modern university, which UBC is clearly one of them, encourages this. I mean, it's part of UBC says you have to go out with your findings, inform the people, because actually we are supported by the population. We are working for the public.
Right.
And that is what is driving me and many of my colleagues at the moment.
Yeah.
A few decades ago, you couldn't do that. Oh,
Right.
you are a researcher, you don't have to say a word.
Right.
Oh my gosh, it was crazy, but things are changing, and I think for the better.
Yeah.
Just getting out the information.
Yeah. How much do you ever get to work with, like with the policymakers? Do you get called upon to talk to them ever?
In fact, yes, I have had a lot of possibilities here. I mean, gone to all sorts of places. I have been to the Canadian Parliament talking about with the Fisheries Committee a number of times, asking me about issues on subsidies and illegal fishing and so on. I've been to the United Nations several times and being asked to come there. I've even had time with Prince Charles. I mean, he's invited me to the palace, me and other experts around the world. Yeah,
cool.
And we had, it was beautiful to see him giving his talk and actually citing some of our work and numbers. It was beautiful, right?
Yeah.
So yes, our work is getting traction, is getting up there.
Yeah.
When you're educating governments and officials and things like that, how do they generally respond to your information?
Oh my gosh, sometimes very positively, but sometimes it can be quite rough. I remember a few years ago I got invited to the British House of Lords. This is the G20 parliamentarians having a meeting. So they brought us about 4 scientists, one to talk about the biology, one to talk about that, and me to talk about the economics. The subsidies was my main topic then. And subsidies, just for my audience, this is taxpayer money, usually given out by governments to the fishing sector for all sorts of reasons. I mean, political, social, and so on. But the thing is, most of those monies actually go to stimulate more fishing. So they lead to overcapacity, they lead to overfishing, and therefore depletion of the stocks. So many of us who study this really don't like what we call capacity enhancing subsidies, because they lead to more depletion. Why should you use public money to stimulate the depletion of a public resource? That doesn't make sense.
Essentially, they're probably doing it to increase employment.
Yeah, that's social. Yeah, employment. But then actually, this is only short term. In the long run, they actually undermine employment. And this is just
that's true. Yeah,
and that is the point. So at this meeting, I made this point, and the Speaker of the Indonesian Parliament was in there. He just went after me. Me and him, about 5 minutes back and forth. He said, "No, Rashid, we're doing it to help the poor, and we do." I said, "Sir, if you want a foot soldier to deal with poverty, you can come and take me along. I will help you. But this is not how to do it. You're undermining the resource that your poor actually depend on." Exactly. What will they do next? So and actually it was beautiful. By the time we finished, he actually tried to invite me to come and talk at the parliament in Indonesia. So that was beautiful,
so
actually.
You kind of won that argument a little bit.
Oh, yeah. He conceded. It was so clear. I mean, by the time we went back home. So, yeah, you get all sorts of reactions like that.
When I was diving in Indonesia, I had a very proactive ocean dive master, and he was talking about how he's doing his small little part in that area of the world to educate the population there, and particularly it's about like reefs and damaging the reefs. And he was explaining to the people who would fish these reefs that, if you throw your anchor overboard and you destroy the reef or you're damaging the reef, he put it in the way that you're destroying the fish's home.
Yeah.
So if you destroy the home, there's nowhere for the fish to go, and there's going to be no fish to feed your family down the road, right?
Absolutely.
And he was doing a very grassroots version of exactly the same thing that you're doing.
And I love that. I really love that. And NGOs, non-governmental organizations, play a big role here, where they go into communities, try to help them to see the deep connection between them and their natural resources and their environment. Now, what you are doing may seem good to you now, but the consequences are really going to be negative. And that is the kind of, so you get locals really taking the mental and really doing something. It's really nice to see. We need to replicate more of this around the world.
Yeah. I think that's kind of neat, and this is a little bit off topic, I guess, but in the diving community, you're seeing a lot of dive masters, dive instructors, and they're very big on ocean conservation now. And it's great because they're actually he was speaking to I guess local populations there about reef destruction, and also he educates tourists. So there's all these tourists coming down to all these dive resorts, and they talk about ocean conservation.
Absolutely.
So it's like a very grassroots level, but now they're reaching people, and it's very so effective because those people can go down, see the reef, see the fish, see what they're doing, see what's actually happening, and then they go back and have that experience. So that actually means something to them.
Yeah, no, this is beautiful. It's absolutely important. And if I may give another example. There was a collaboration in Dubai and the Arab Emirates that invited me to come. This was after our documentary, End of the Line, was broadcast.
Was that your documentary?
Yeah, I
That's
was
on
in
Netflix
there.
now, I think.
I was in there. Yeah, it's
I have to
in there,
watch that.
And so they brought me in there, and we showed this in 8 schools, from primary school to universities. It was amazing. And then at the end, one evening, the diving association there actually organized screening of this at the beach in Dubai, invited locals, everybody, and made the connection. This was the kind of thing. These are the diving association there. And I think they had a huge impact, more than I could ever have alone. So the connection also between grassroots and university people interested is an important thing to do too.
And definitely what you're doing, I think, with dealing with government officials, that's the big piece of the pie,
big
right?
fish.
They're the policymakers. They're the ones that are they're the big fish.
Absolutely.
And I think that it's awesome that you're working with people at that level and they're actually listening.
No, it's nice. The policymakers they create the framework in which all these small actors play. So if you get that right, it really enhances and supports the work of individuals and groups on the ground.
Yeah, there's something I wanted to bring up. We talked a little bit about it last time, and in my notes I rebroached it, and I thought it's so fascinating because this is really where it's really cool, you being an economist coming into this world. And there's a publication you did, and it's I'll just read the title because you'll know exactly what it is. It's fish from the high seas are too valuable to be eaten, as they are lessen climate change through the carbon they carry down to the ocean depths. The carbon benefits are worth $150 billion every year, almost 10 times the value of the high seas fish landings. So just take that back for a second. What is a high seas fish landing? What is that?
Very good. You can split the global ocean into 2 areas. There is what we call the exclusive economic zone of countries. So Canada's exclusive economic zone is that part of the ocean from the shore to 200 nautical miles into the ocean. So each country claims that. You are given the right through the UN to manage that. But then the rest of the ocean, over and above 200 nautical miles, is what we call the high seas.
Gotcha. Okay.
And this is a large part of the ocean. In fact, it's 2/3 of the ocean. And this is still almost free for all. I mean, there are management organizations that are trying to help manage fishing there wisely, but it's not effective because it's not under any governmental control. All right, so that's the high sea. Now, if you take the total catch we take from the world ocean, we take about 80 million tons of fish a year out of the ocean.
Wow.
80 million tons. If you convert that to number of cows mature cows.
Okay.
You are talking about 80 million mature cows that we pull out of the ocean each year.
Wow.
Year in, year. Isn't that amazing?
It's a huge food
It's
source.
huge. I mean, protein, think of that.
Yeah.
And so that is a big thing. And jobs, people who have to process all this things, and most of them are in large developing countries where people will have nothing else to do apart from fishing. So
Right.
there is a social benefit to all of us, security-wise, right?
Yeah.
A lot of our little troubles we see in the world is because people don't just have anything to do. A wasted hand, I'm trying
Oh,
to...
yeah.
Yeah.
What's the phrase?
Yeah, an idle mind.
An idle mind is the devil's playground or
There
something
you
like that.
go,
Yeah.
right? So we are protected, I think, in a big way by the ocean. So that is the jobs and income and money side of things.
Yeah.
Now, if you take those 80 million tons, about 10 to 12 million come from the high seas.
Okay.
So the bulk of it, 90%, is within our EEZ.
Okay.
So that is one point. Then connecting to carbon, one of the things economists do, we say the ocean provides us a number of services. We have food services, provisioning like fish, but we have other services, and one big one that is becoming clearer and clearer is the carbon service. The animals, when they live in the ocean, I was working with my colleague at Oxford, Alex Rogers. I spent 6 weeks, not this summer, the last one, with him where we looked at this. He is the scientist looking at just by moving up and down animals in the ocean, they generate dynamics that actually leads to the sequestration of carbon. Taking them
Wow.
down. Yeah. So he quantified the quantity of carbon, and I then put in the dollar value on this. That's where that came from.
That's amazing. So
That's-
they calculated by the amount of fish moving up
Moving
and
the
down
yeah.
is actually stirring up the carbon from the top
and
to the
taking
bottom.
it to the bottom and
That's
doing a big job
It's
for
amazing
us.
they could even calculate
It's
that.
remarkable. I mean, this is where science is going, right?
Yeah.
So, and once you have that, then the economists like me will say, hey guys, if we were cleaning up the same quantity of carbon, this is the billions we would have had to spend.
Carbon
achieve
emissions.
Right.
Yeah. So
Right.
there you go.
So-
And oh my dear.
So this is the tricky part, I think. This
Yes,
is where,
this is the tricky
This
part.
is like where it gets to the point of it's like, well, okay, so we need fish for food.
Yes.
All right, we need fish for employment.
Yes.
All right, we need fish for the environment.
Yes.
All right. Now, how do we find the balance
How do we
between it
find
all?
the balance? And this is where we need to be very clever and creative, really. And that is the point. So, for example, 2/3 of the ocean is high seas. And that 2/3 gives you 10% of the catch. And this 10% is being caught by 10 to 12 countries mainly. Usually rich countries, the Koreas of the world, the Spain of the world. They don't employ many people because these are large operations. You have to have a big boat and they do everything. So you think about the catch, the social side, the jobs, the money, the distribution of the benefits. It's really skewed. Okay, so that's one point. 90% comes from the EEZs, where we, in general, manage better, right? And then more importantly, there is a connection between the two.
Right.
The fish don't spend all their time in the high seas, they do straddle. And
Yeah.
so if we manage that cleverly, we can actually get catches coming in through fish moving in. There's a new paper coming. I can't talk much about it. We can talk about that later. There's a new paper we just got accepted where we went into depth about this. You will love it.
Nice.
It's beautiful where we do. So there is a way to do this, to let the high seas do the sequestration for us, allow the fish to hide there, grow, and migrate. Then we catch them and we're able to meet some of our food needs. You know, there are ways to do this and to do better than we're doing now.
Right.
Yeah. Mm.
Right. So, if you were to say, in your opinion, could it be cleaned up? Could it be managed properly? Could it be managed and brought to a sustainable level, including with the population growth of humans on this planet? You said reaching close to 9 billions
Yeah.
in a few years, right?
Yeah.
So can we actually manage it sustainably to maintain fish populations, and then still enjoy all the benefits around that?
Yeah, that is not straightforward. It's not easy, but it's possible. At least in theory, that is where you usually start. It's possible to do this, and you have to think of ways. I say that fish is animal protein that both the rich and the poor actually like. The rich, because it's his choice, right? You know, if you have a good day in Vancouver, right, one of the places you go to celebrate, you go to sushi, or you go to the sea restaurant, right?
Yeah, of course.
The sea restaurant, right? So,
Yeah.
so it's good for well-to-do people in that sense. And when you go to Southeast Asia, for example, some people, that is the only protein they can get to eat, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, how do we balance this? There is a colleague of mine, Daniel Pauli, came up with an idea where he said, actually, you know, we in the rich part of the world, we should probably use fish as if it was medicine. You know, not something you eat to fill your belly, but something you eat to enrich health food or taste food or something, you know. So there are things that we can do, and then those who have no alternative will then have something to eat. So you need to do some clever work there, right?
Right.
So that's one thing. Another thing is responsible, sustainable agriculture can contribute. And China is doing a lot of this. They farm the tilapia, they farm carp, not carnivorous fishes, but herbivorous ones.
Okay.
That you don't need fish meal to feed. They can actually fill a big hole here for us if we do it properly.
Well, I heard that tilapia, they actually use them to clean up like water treatment plants.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they do integrated fish farming, where there is almost a circle, right?
Yes.
So they clean up and their poo is used for somebody and something. And Asia is, again, very good at that. So there are ways we can do this if we really put our minds to...
How do you feel about I'm not sure if you know much about this, but like farmed fish versus wild fish?
Yeah.
A lot of people are very hesitant, even myself, to buy farmed fish.
Absolutely.
And if I can, I'll always buy wild salmon as opposed to farmed salmon, and it looks different. Like the fat in the farmed salmon is like there's more. The color is different. With the wild, there's less fat, and it's like a more rich kind of pink orange kind of color, you know?
You know, if that is, I was alluding to that a little bit in my last comment. Actually, salmon is one of the fishes you don't want to farm, actually.
No.
Yeah, you don't want to farm it. It takes in a lot of energy. Scientists have calculated, I don't know exactly where the numbers are, but at least 3 times roughly is amount of energy in terms of other fishes, fish meal, that it has to take to produce one.
So it's very inefficient.
It's very inefficient in terms of the mass of food. I mean, dollars might be something else because we like to pay for this. So that is one of the things you probably don't want to fish, but to farm. But then you have the other ones like the carps of the world that you want to do. They could actually be chickens of the ocean, right? Or chickens, what we call fish chicken, if you like. In the sense that they really feed people.
Their role is to feed people, basically.
To feed people, So we need to be very nuanced there, what we really farm and what we don't. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, we kind of touched this the last time we talked too, is like, you know, there's going to be a period of potential, you know, maybe we need to cut back on how much we're doing. Like, you know, if we want to really tackle this problem, there might have to be some sort of restrictions put in place on the public and these industries to how much they can take and how much they can sell and how much we can consume.
Yep.
Do you think is that going to happen, you think?
Yeah, there is a big push to do that. And a paper which was published in 2009 by the World Bank is a report. They estimated that if we allowed the fish to come back to rebuild, that's a big if we were able to do this, we could increase the total dollars that is made out of fishing by $50 billion a year. $50 billion.
Wow.
So this has got people sitting up.
Of course, money talks, eh?
Exactly, yes, yeah. And our group, we did an estimate. This was published in 2012, where we said if we were able to do that, we could actually catch about 10 million tons of fish more. 10 million cows, right?
Amazing.
So that again on the food security side. So there are a number of studies like this that are coming up and again, and that is making people really sit up. In fact, I think that is what got Prince Charles interested in
profit motive behind it, potentially.
Yeah, he actually says, how can we do this, right? People need the food, and $50 billion is not bad to have in the world economy, right?
No,
especially in the depressed parts of the world also.
Of course.
So we need to do that. Now, the thing is you will have to do sacrifice a bit. because you have to cut effort. And this is where the challenge comes. How do we do that? In our paper, we actually estimated how much money we need to soften the blow on fishers so that we can get this movement, compensation, alternative employment, and so on. So it is possible to actually pay for this within the potential that is coming. But somebody has to stand up and
so is this the one that you said, like taking the subsidies that are currently going to fisheries to something like this?
Exactly, and that is one of my lines, that I'm not saying take out the money out of the communities, because really they need the money. That is all right. We all want them to have a good life. The question is, how do you use this money? And one of the clever ways to do is actually to build their resource so they can have a better future. So convert this negative subsidies into positive ones by doing something like that.
Cool.
That is also one of the things on the on the card. Yeah.
Well, I think it's awesome that, I mean, at least these talks are kind of happening. There's theories behind it. There's planning. You know, these are the first steps of it, really. You know, for any sort of action to take place, is we have to understand things. You know, this is the whole process, especially people in yourself and your role with research and everything. This is, we need to learn. The more we learn about this stuff, the more we'll be able to make a better tactical action, hopefully before it's too late.
Yes, that's, you've just hit on the nail, and this is what keeps all of us and most of my colleagues alive and awake and trying to really get information out.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this then. So in terms of all the information that you know, and kind of the the motivations behind making a profit and feeding people, and the politics, and the social responsibilities behind it all, and the environment, and the nature of humanity to just kind of consume everything and not really worry about it too much. Are you optimistic about the future or pessimistic about the future?
This is a question I get a lot, and I always go with the optimistic. I always do that. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't be here, right? Just look back at history. I mean, all the challenges society has faced, and how slowly the big ones, we take them down one by one somehow, and this is what keeps me hopeful, and we just need to get the information, get the science, get the understanding, get it to the public, like Mike just said, and you are saying, and hopefully we will get there before it's too late. That's really the big point.
That's the thing.
And if anyone is out there, put in whatever you can put in to get us moving towards finding solutions to our big environmental problems, because hey, that is really our home, isn't it? The environment.
So that's what houses humanity, you know.
Yeah,
exactly.
One person who put it really interesting I heard one time was Graham Hancock, I think it was. He's an author. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. Pretty famous. He was saying, humanity really only exists in a really tiny, thin sliver around a 3-mile, distance from the Earth.
Yeah.
And the entire universe. That's all we know that humanity actually exists in. It's
there.
really so small.
Yeah.
Yet we still abuse it. Basically, at this point, we're still abusing that.
Absolutely.
So. Given the state of how we know humans are, I'm glad that you're optimistic too, because it's just
we have to be. Yeah.
You have to be.
We have to be. I mean, otherwise you don't wake up from bed in the morning, or you wouldn't have.
Or you'd be curled up in a fetal position, crying, being like, "Oh my gosh!"
Yeah. In my group, we have a very nice saying which I propagate among my students and colleagues. JKP, just keep pushing.
Okay.
Just keep going. I mean, that's the only way we can make improvements. And you don't.
And I think that's a great, kind of mantra to have for the work you're doing. Yeah. But then it's got to be, but that mantra is used a lot in different forms for the wrong intention. So we got to be, it's got to be applied to the right intention, right? And actually, going along with what you just said, like, what are things that people, the general population, can do? What can I do? I'm a citizen of Vancouver. What would you tell somebody, like generic population? Like, what can I do to
help this problem?
Yeah, help this problem.
This is great. We have talked a lot about fishing, overfishing. We haven't talked about the pollution, the plastic and so on.
Right.
And climate change, we haven't had time to talk more about that.
Yeah.
But in each of these, individuals have a role as individuals. For example, when you go to your supermarket, you carry your little bag in there so you don't take plastic out, which eventually ends up in the ocean and messing things up. Very simple. You go to a restaurant, and I've seen this really improve a lot, especially in Canada, where people will say, oh, they call the waiter and they say, what kind of fish is this? Where does it come from? And all those things. We used not to do that.
I think Vancouver's a hotbed for that kind of thing.
It's remarkable, right?
Yeah,
and if we can get this propagated, and most of the time the waiters or waitress will be astonished that you are asking that question. So, let me go ask my chef, and then at least that does. So where does your fish come from? What kind of fish you eat? The more you can do that, the better. Yeah. Now this is at the macro level, and then we in democracies we have one nice right or benefit or that is going to vote. I mean, and that is a big weapon. And I think each one of us, there are many variables we take when we vote. Please don't forget the environmental variable when you do your final analysis. Yeah, because that's how you get the leaders who will take care of our environment, which we all depend on. So that is one level. You can easily call your member of parliament and say, hey, I just heard that government money our tax money goes to overfishing. How is that? Why are you doing that? What's the purpose?
So at a local level,
level, yeah. Right. So there are a number of things we can all do individually and collectively to really help move the needle.
Do you have much knowledge in terms of what political party in Canada would be the best suited to deal with some of these issues, environmental issues?
Yeah, this is now politics, right? I'm not an expert in politics.
No.
But I do know, the environmental platform. In fact, in one of my courses, what I do is I give my students each of the platforms of the parties in terms of the environment. They read and summarize, and we discuss and so on. And if you look at it at the moment, of course, the MDP and the Greens will clearly be, but again, you have many variables that you take into account, and it goes that way.
Okay, cool. Well, you touched on a couple things just a minute ago that we can further explore. So we talked about overfishing, and there's two other things that we should probably talk about in regards to ocean environmental health is the plastic.
Yes.
And what ultimately, what's happening, what the cause is, and how it's affecting the ocean health.
The plastics, most of the plastic you see floating around us, most of it ends up in the ocean.
Really?
It gets blown in, and many of them actually break up into small particles that actually stay for long. They have a very long life. I haven't even seen anyone say they live. They just hang in there, and they become little particles that the fish see and see them as food, as algae. So they swallow them up, and the consequences go in there. Right? It's not food, so it poisons the fish in some cases, and then those who eat them. So there are those kind of problems associated with plastic. Right, and again, actions can be taken. And actually, I've read in a number of countries, I can't remember exactly where, the use of plastic bags in shops are banned. Actually,
I think California banned it.
I know Toronto, Ontario. I don't think they're banned, but I believe there's a tax on them now.
And that is an economic tool, which is great, right?
Yeah.
So if you want it, you pay, and then anyone who cleans up can get the money back. You can have nice economic devices to deal with this, and in some cases they say you have to use organic carriers rather than plastic. So it's becoming, people are getting aware of it. You go to some developing countries, you can't believe it. You walk in and you see in the ground half of it buried and half floating out, and it's so ugly to start with, and start in the ocean.
And I know Indonesia is particularly can be one of the bad ones for this one. Like I was surfing in Kuta Beach in Bali, and you're just swimming through the ocean, and you're getting plastic bags stuck to your arms. It's just amazing. I was amazed by how much plastic was in the water.
That's unbelievable.
And I've seen this video. I'm not sure where it is in Indonesia, but you see this river, and people just throw all their trash into the river, and then every now and again it just kind of purges out into the ocean, and that just ends up all over the place.
place
Right.
kills their fish, and then
Yeah.
they don't understand why they can't get fish to catch, right? I mean,
Right.
The connections, and this is where knowledge and understanding comes in. And because many of the people who do this don't make the big connections. It's just now
Right.
and here and me, and that's
Well,
it.
and it really comes down to like just being in scarcity mode, you know, worrying about wanting to feed your family, make ends meet, and you know, most people are really just focused on that, and to think about the big picture is almost too much. They're worried about feeding their family, you know. So
Indeed.
at that point, you can be sympathetic and be like, well, I can understand that,
Yeah.
you know.
And actually, I do research on discounting, which is an economic term. Discounting, where you discount the flows of benefits that come to you, right? And because the key point is that $1 to you today is more valuable than $1 coming to you in the future, right? The same
Definitely.
quantity, right?
Yeah.
So that drives this kind of thing. If you're hungry and you need the fish to eat now, hey, forget about sustainability, right? So that's a good point. You see a lot of pressure in poor coastal areas of the world. So what does that mean for us? I mean, so some will say we just have to work on reducing poverty in the world at the bottom.
That would be,
Yeah, that will take out the pressure. At least at the top, we have more flexibility anyways, right? So,
Well, and that's, but I mean, as we was really well highlighted by the Wall Street movement a couple
To
of years
Occupy
ago.
Wall Street, yeah.
Is how
the
how
wealth inequity.
the inequity.
oh yeah, the 1%ers, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's a huge thing. It's so huge that even the Pope cannot ignore it. You know, right? And
true.
they're all talking about it, but the question is, how do we start concretely dealing with this, right? And our high seas paper, I mentioned one of the issues is equity, actually, because you have something which is a resource for the whole world, and only 10 countries take 70% of the value, right? So there you go, right there, you see that there is inequity. Yeah.
It's huge. Yeah.
So I was watching a show. I don't watch TV very often, but I'm at my parents' house, and they always had the TV on, basically. But I'm watching this show about tuna, and they were catching these giant tuna, and these fish are going for like $20,000 a fish.
$40,000.
$40,000,
Yes.
and they'll do like a core sample. They'll take a sample of the tuna, and based on the quality of the meat, it's worth so much. I'm guessing it wasn't like that before. I guess when you could say we could walk across the ocean because there's so many fish in the water.
Yeah.
And now it's like one fish is worth $40,000.
Yeah, so-
Is that just because of the lack of fish?
Yeah, the scarcity is definitely a part. There are two arms to this. You have the demand side and the supply side. So scarcity plays into. And why is the scarcity? There's a lot of demand. I mean, these tunas, they go to the top sushi restaurants in Japan and around the world where there are top-level sushi restaurants. And
Yeah.
these things used not to be there, at least not outside Japan, only a few decades ago.
Well, especially
yeah.
Vancouver is such a hotbed for sushi. Like, and I love it. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, no, well-
We went to this place. It's a really high-end sushi place in Vancouver called Miku. I'm not sure if you've heard of that one.
Yep.
We went there, and we sometimes go to this other place called Samurai. And Samurai gives you these big slabs of tuna, like big pieces. And I don't know, what is that worth there? Like
Oh, yeah.
12, 14
Pretty
bucks,
reasonable,
something like
yeah.
that.
It's reasonable.
And then we go to Miku,
Uh-huh.
and probably around $15, $16 for the sashimi there, but you get a piece that's maybe
So-
one piece of the other tuna at that place, and it's really thinly
Sliced.
sliced, and it tastes really good. But it's just like, wow, this is like a little morsel. It's like putting a little piece of paper in your mouth. You know?
Yeah,
And
it
I'm-
melts away, right?
But yeah, it tastes great. But I'm
Yeah,
guessing
yeah.
that's an example of the high-end sushi,
high-
and that's where it's going, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we this idea of some species like the bluefin tunas being so valuable also means that they are very much at risk, right? Because if you're that valuable and you're a fish that can be sold, we're gonna find you, right? And
Exactly.
So, yeah. So the biomass of bluefin tuna in particular is going down, and big eye is following. And that's the thing. We take the most pricey, valuable, the one we like to eat, and then we get to the next one and the next one. And
Yeah. Can you go into more about how they said in the West we should potentially be using fish as medicine, maybe for like the health properties of it, the omega fatty acids, all those good things you get from fish,
Yeah.
and saving the fish for a food source somewhere else?
yeah.
How would we go about doing that? I mean, just basically became like we don't buy plastic bags at the grocery stores anymore.
Yeah.
Now it's like at the West we should stop eating fish.
Yeah. We should eat fish intelligently. That's what we're saying, right? I mean, yeah.
And what does that mean to you?
Yeah, that is once a while. It's not something you day and like you eat chicken, right? So that's the point. I mean, you just moderate, and this will depend from person to person.
Yeah, that could be the next big movement. Is fish for medicine, not for dinner.
That's the thing, though.
And actually, this is not only in the West, but this also applies to the well-to-do in big developing countries too, right?
Sure.
I mean, this is if you're in São Paulo or you are in wherever. I mean.
Well, I heard this interesting argument, and the reason I bring this up is one of our last guests on the podcast, Dr. Suki and Chris. They brought in before the podcast a protein bar.
Yeah.
And it was actually made of crickets.
Crickets. Oh yeah.
And they say crickets are like one. I'm not sure what the designation is, but one step away from being a lobster, basically.
Indeed.
So the argument, if you could eat a lobster, you can eat a cricket.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, it tastes just like chocolate. You don't even know what you're eating.
You don't know why you're eating.
And there's a little mini movement I've heard of people believing we should be eating insects
and worms.
And
also.
Worms. Okay. Let's bring on the worms,
guy,
baby.
You can't take that one, right, Mike?
Hey, I just love it. Hey, you know what you gotta do? You gotta
ideas.
You gotta put them in the oven, dry roast them. Crumble them up. Now
you don't even know why.
That's your bacon bits now, right?
Gosh, yeah. This is. Where are we heading to? That's the discussion here.
But no more anchovies in your Caesar salad. Now you're gonna have salted worm bits.
There you go.
There you go. Salted worm bits. Right? I'm game for that. They said, what's the rule? Something like only if a lower species eats a higher species, only 10% of the energy consumed by that species actually moves up the ladder each time. So the argument is if the fish are eating the insects, well, it's more efficient for us to go eat the insects than eat the fish, right?
Absolutely. You're talking about what they call biologists call the trophic efficiency.
Trophic efficiency, yes. That's the word I was trying to drum up there.
And people are arguing. Anchovies are a good example from Peru, for example. A lot of the anchovies are crushed for fish and pigs and so on.
Right.
So there is a movement. Another colleague of ours, Patricia is amazing. She has taken it upon herself to shift the use of anchovies for fish and other animal consumption into people consumption. And she managed, for example, to get the president of Peru to actually eat anchovies on national television. Huge, because this is fish for poor people, and this is their own president. Chefs are making all sorts of nice delicacies with it. So yeah, you have that. How do you move down the trophic level, get a larger mass of food for people, and still be fine?
See, yeah, we wouldn't want a politician in this country doing that. We probably need something like Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie or something, eating anchovies to get the message across in North America, right?
Yeah, it's a different thing.
Politicians are like, I'm not going to eat those anchovies. That's what they're eating. Forget that.
Forget that.
But if you go, Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie eating anchovies, then next thing you know, you're going to see all these girls down on Robson Street ordering anchovies all day long. Right?
Well, I agree with you. It will vary from place to place, my dear friend. I mean, some people will not touch it because the Prime Minister is touching it. I know that. Yeah, so you are right on that.
No,
right on the money.
I'm just saying. I was thinking. Yeah.
It's good. It's
good.
Excellent. Yeah.
I don't even know what I was doing anymore.
Well, but I think that's that whole big roundabout kind of highlights another potential solution is let's use the fish. I mean, unfortunately, it's such a highly healthy food.
Yeah, it is.
But okay, let's use the fish a little bit more sparingly, and maybe if we need more protein, let's look at the insect market. I mean, you could insect farming and crickets and grasshoppers. These things are very edible, and I'm sure if applied properly with chefs, and they can make nice dishes. You could have cricket pasta.
You don't even know what you're eating. To take off from there. Jellyfish.
Jellyfish.
In China. Yeah. I mean, I've been to Shanghai a number of times. There's no meal without a pot of jellyfish. Yeah.
Wow. You can get that here. You can get that here.
Yeah. They do it. And actually, they are even farming some species of jellyfish. Wow, isn't it? I was blown away when I heard this.
Doesn't jellyfish, don't they clean up the ocean in some way too?
Yeah, they do have functions in the system, definitely. Yeah. So, but then the problem is they are blooming all over because the other fishes are gone. That's the thing about cleaning up the ocean. You really don't clean it up. You clean it up of certain things, but some things will take over. right? Some things will fill the space.
Well, that's
they may
the
not
nature.
take the things you want, right?
Yeah.
And
You know
that's
what?
the thing.
In my dream world, what we do is we take all the human beings, we put them in some sort of like spaceship for, let's say, 10 years.
Yeah.
Let the world, no, 100 years. Excuse me, 100 years. Let the world kind of rebalance itself, and then we'll come back. We'll repopulate the world with sustainable systems in place.
And those 100 years, you are really educating and re-educating. You
Yeah.
are trying to work on this thing we have, the push to just consume, and all the excesses, right?
Yeah.
It's because otherwise, when we come out, we are going to even go for it fast.
I know. That's the
So
thing.
we need that.
But, anyways, let's move on to the last kind of ocean issue is acidification.
Oh yeah.
What is that? How does it happen? If you know, I know you're not the marine biologist, but I'm sure you know a little bit more than me.
Yeah, we did a report. We published a report for the Arctic Council, which is the 8 countries bordering the Arctic. Yeah, so Canada, of course, is included.
Russia.
Many European, Norway, and so on. They put up a group of scientists. They had chemists, they have biologists, and then they have social scientists. And we were tasked with looking at ocean acidification effects and impacts on the Arctic in particular, because the knowledge we have now tells us that that is one area. It's a hotspot for ocean acidification because of the nature of the place. You have the ice melting, you have freshening of fresh water coming in. All the dynamics means that acidification is going to be higher there than, say, in the tropics. Okay, and acidification is simply, it's a chemical thing. You have the mixing of carbon and oxygen and creating a more acid. The water is more acidic, and this is turning out to be a very worrisome problem, especially for shellfishes, the fishes that form carbonates.
Right,
on
like
their skin.
hard exoskeletons.
Exactly. They are those that are really having it hard. I mean, in Washington here, even the farmers are seeing it happening. The water is really becoming.
It's beginning.
Here. It's happening here. So the crabs.
They're being affected. So the shellfish farmers in Washington have been up in arms, actually.
Oh, wow.
Trying to find new species and how to modify, and lots of research to understand what is going on.
Wow.
So this is not a joke, right? So you have the Arctic being a hotspot. And then in terms of climate change, the research shows that fish in the tropics are going to have a much difficult time, because as the water is warming quickly, it gets out of the range within which they can live, right? Me and you, when we feel too hot, what do? We put in air conditioners, right? And when it's too cold, we put up the heater. They don't have that opportunity.
No.
What the fish will do is, those who can follow the temperature do follow the temperature. And there's research showing this from our group. William Chang is leading that at the Fisheries Center. So the fish are moving from the tropics to the poles because of this, right?
Wow.
And the fish that are at the poles, they have no place to go, they perish. And that's the thing. So new fish. So, and this is not, mackerel has been moving away from English waters to Icelandic waters. In fact, a few years ago, they almost went to war because of this.
Wow.
Because Icelandics are catching. They're just catching.
Yeah.
And the British say, hey, come on, this is
our
our fish. What are you doing? And you know, I met the Icelandic president in Singapore at a meeting. And a British guy, Charles Clover, actually, the main star in the end of the line, he was in the meeting, and he went after the president when he gave his talk. He said, "Sir, why are you guys doing this? You know this mackerel is not your fish. Why?" And the president had a big laugh. He said, "Oh, you, the British people, you have to be realistic. These fish are no more yours. They are ours."
So like, listen, British Prime Minister guy, okay? They don't want to be around you anymore.
They will come into us.
Okay,
because
now they're
we
our
are nice.
fish. Okay.
No, it's
We smell better.
Yeah, you know. So there you go. So we have all these dynamics taking place, and the overall outcome at the end of the day, we don't even understand enough yet. The research is going on.
Yeah.
But this just gives you the picture. So fish are moving from hot water towards the poles, and then they go into acid.
That's too bad. That really saddens me a little bit.
No, you see, when I say this thing, it just hits me. I mean, it's it's just terrible. I mean,
So they're moving out because the water's too warm at the equator,
and
then going to an acid bath,
which is cooler, but then there is it's more acidic. So what life
That's
is
too bad
this?
because like I love diving in the tropics, you know,
Yeah.
and now we're gonna go down there and there's gonna be nothing to see.
What do you see? What do you
And also
see?
the coral too, right?
Oh, the
That's
coral is bleaching like crazy.
The coral
because
bleaching.
because of the climate. Yeah,
And
and the acid.
acidification affects that as well.
Exactly, impact. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. No, we have big challenges. We just have to.
You gotta get people educated.
Yeah,
You know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean,
Uh,
well, doing little things like
but-
this is definitely not the scale that which you're used to dealing with, but this is a little micro scale, and there will be people that hear this, you know.
Yeah.
And now you're getting your message out to more people.
Yeah, this is our job, including you guys. I mean, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
That's why I always come. Yeah.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
if you ask me to come the third time, I will actually.
All right. All right.
Yes,
Amazing.
Because
Cool.
yeah, we have to do this job.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's the good fight, right?
good
This
fight,
is worthy of your life and your energy
Absolutely.
and your all your passion and enthusiasm, which is super refreshing. I mean, this has been such a cool, and this is the same as the last podcast that never aired between us. Is like I get to. It feels like we're in like a lecture hall where actually we get to talk to the prof.
It's
Oh, it's amazing.
And just like I'm want to take notes, and
Yeah.
it's
Well, the
really
good thing
exciting.
is it's recorded for you. You can listen to it whenever
It's
you want.
fantastic. And,
Yeah.
and you know what? You guys are the colleagues in the room, in the lecture room. You know, the questioning were quite interesting, and additions coming in.
Yeah.
It all stimulates the whole thing, and this is wonderful.
Very cool.
Yeah, thank
Well,
you.
I'm really glad you came on, and I'm really glad you got to be here for this one.
Fantastic.
I
Yeah.
missed the last one, and this is an interesting conversation for sure.
Yeah, but and thank you again for coming back and for all your enthusiasm. It's really fun, and the documentary again is End of the Line.
Yes.
You say it's on Netflix.
End of the Line is on Netflix. I actually started watching it once, and I got to watch the whole thing now. I got to see you in there.
You see me in there.
A little bit in there.
Yeah, being quite funny. Yeah.
And
That's amazing.
And you can always go to the UBC Fisheries Economics Research Unit website, also known as FERU, FERU.
Yeah.
Do you guys call it FERU?
Yeah, Feru.
All right, there you go.
Yeah.
So go to FERU, get in on this. Oh, we didn't talk about game theory. Okay.
Oh,
well,
can we do a little blurb on game theory?
Yeah, game theory is essentially what game theory say. You know, there is always a game being played when there are more than two people in a situation.
right.
So essentially, game theorists will say this interview is a game of three people, three
Right.
players. So in fisheries, this is important because most of our fish stocks are shared. You know, they're shared between countries, they're shared between communities. It's hard to box fish in. You know, fish do not need visa to cross boundaries; they just go, right? And so game theory has been applied a lot by fisheries economists, actually led by Gordon Monroe. Here, he was the first to apply it in his 1979 paper.
Can you give us a Cole's Notes version of game theory and what that actually means?
Okay, maybe I should use an example.
Okay.
Right. You have
You're the
salmon.
teacher.
You have salmon. You know, salmon is fished by the U.S. and Canada.
Yeah.
All right, because it moves, it lives, it migrates. So the two countries quickly realize that if each of us just do what we like with the salmon, it will not be good for all of us together. So because what Canada does will harm U.S. and what the U.S. does can harm Canada. So that is a game situation. You have a game of two players, two countries, U.S. and Canada, and where they meet to play the game is the stock of salmon, because they share the salmon. So what we do in game theory, we develop models of this and say, what happens if we work together cooperatively? We do the science together, we study how much is safely we can take to keep this going sustainably, and we find a way to share that total between our two countries. So that is a cooperative game. So you're working together. And it's applicable to lots of fisheries. It's applicable to climate change and all that.
Okay.
And then the other thing is you do what you like, I do. We work non-cooperatively. We do not collaborate. And again, all the research shows that if you go all your ways, you harm the stock. You have depletion, it affects your economics, it affects your jobs and so on in the medium to long term.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay, and I've heard that kind of applied to the idea of the prisoner's dilemma. Is that what that is?
Yeah. When you talk about the non-cooperative situation, it takes you to what is known as the prisoner's dilemma. Essentially, if you don't work together, you all end up in a bad place, which is the prisoner's dilemma. And you push to there just because you are thinking of me, right? And what is the prisoner's dilemma? Two people went and committed a crime. The police arrest them. They take them to separate rooms, and they say, if you confess and your colleague does not confess, we'll let you go, right? And they tell the other person the same. But if both of you don't confess, then we have nothing to, we have no evidence. So you may get some little 6 months each, but if both of you don't confess. And if both of you confess, then we have both of you, right? So you tell them. And each person confesses, believing that the other may.
And in most cases, do most people rat each other out then? In that situation, would most people choose to confess?
Yeah,
blame the other person.
That is what the theory says. If
Right.
you're just thinking, because the thinking is that, come on, if I don't confess and he confesses, then he gets away and I stay in.
So they're always
So,
going to be, normally they're going to always be the first to confess, unless it's a real trusted person, like someone like your brother, that is going to hold up his end of the bargin. That's the only way you're going to win.
Then you are in good shape. You're in good shape, right?
Right.
But otherwise,
Keep that in mind if we ever get in trouble. Okay.
Hey, we believe it. So, and they take you away with that communication, and
Yes.
of course they don't know about game theory, and so they just all go into the hole, and that is good. And fishing, when we do our models, that is where they end up. Because it's the same thing. If I don't catch the fish, he will catch it, right? So I catch it. That is what we call the race for the fish. So each person is racing because it's not yours until it's in your boat, right?
Yeah.
So and that dynamics always leads us to this bad state. And that's why we see so much of around the world, right? So biologists are arguing, they are not sure whether there's overfishing. I say, you know what? I don't even need to count the fish. I know there's overfishing.
Yeah.
By the nature of things, there's no management, there's no collaboration. They're going to go for it.
Yeah.
So that's the power of the thing. Yeah.
How far along are they to actually collaborating?
Yeah, we do see collaboration. Salmon is a good one. Canada and US have been collaborating. Once in a while it collapses and climate change comes into play.
Right.
Because climate change is changing the migration pattern and time. So once in a while Canada will say, come on, this thing is not fair to me because the fish remain in my waters longer than before,
Right.
or they spawn more. So the climate change has the ability to actually change the basis of your agreement.
Wow.
And so Canada, I think this is the third round they've done it. The Norwegians and the Soviet Union, even then, collaborated on cod. And it's one of the healthy cods that cod stocks that we still have. They always work together. They decide the quota and they share among themselves. And they've been doing this since the 80s, I believe.
Wow.
Successfully.
Good for
So
them.
you do have, good for them indeed. You have examples of this around the world as we reveal more and more. So most of our work is showing the benefits of collaborating, cooperation. Getting out of the prisoner's dilemma is good for you if you can find a way to do it. Right.
Right.
That is the big
Awesome.
challenge. Yeah.
Well,
Cool.
people listen to that. We got to work together.
Yeah.
Work
Okay.
together.
That's
And
not too bad.
no more of this lone wolf
Because
trying to take care of your own, get your own.
It's a global
So-
world
we
now.
are
Yeah.
in it together, really. We
Yeah.
are in it
Nine,
together.
well, coming soonly 9 billion people.
Yeah.
You got to do it.
And if there's anyone who doesn't really see how globalized the world is, just think of Ebola, right? This is something that started in these three recently war-torn countries, completely messed up, no healthcare, no system. And before we know, it's everybody's problem, the world over, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, so there you go. We are truly globalized.
Yeah.
Definitely.
You're right.
Yeah.
It's a very good point.
Yes.
Cool. Well, Dr. Rashid Sumaila, it's been a pleasure. Maybe we'll have you back in another 6-8 months or something, and you get an update. You can tell us what's happening, what's developed, what you're working on. And
hopefully 6-8 months. Hopefully not a month because we lose the audio.
Yeah.
That'd be ideal.
If we can keep this one,
we can keep this one, then we think about
but
sometime.
I'll go on record saying this was better than last.
Yeah,
so
fantastic.
It all happened for a reason.
Yeah.
Okay.
But thank you so much for coming on, and
thank you.
Welcome back anytime. It's Fisheries Economics Research Unit at the UBC. Professor and director there is Dr. Rashid Sumaila. So thanks again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It's good you said this one was better because practice makes almost perfect.
You're right.
So
there you go.
Yeah.
Cool.
Take care, guys.
And next time, Vancouver Real to whatever is.
Whatever is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Wonderful.